So there is bad news for those of us who want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. It appears the clock is nearly running out. Now, this is from Antonio Guterres. Now, he is the United Nations Secretary General, and he basically told leaders this week that the world has less than 2 years to avoid runaway climate change. In his speech, he said, if we do not change course by 2020, we risk missing the point where we can avoid runaway climate change. He goes on to continue by saying climate change is the defining issue of our time, and we are at a defining moment. Scientists have been telling us for decades, over and over again. Far too many leaders have refused to listen. Now, I'm pretty sure he was pointing directly at Donald Trump, because President Trump thinks climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. So, yes, this is one leader that does not listen to climate change and does not accept reality. Now, you also have Republican leaders here in the United States, an entire political party who runs on a platform that basically does not include climate change, says it doesn't even exist. And you have senators that go up and take snowballs into the Senate chambers to try and prove that it doesn't exist. This is the modern Republican Party. And of course, it's no surprise that when you have politicians that do go out there and take snowballs into the Senate chamber or say ridiculous, stupid things like, ooh, I don't know, carbon's actually good for greening the earth. Well, then, of course, you're going to have it led by complete ignoramus. That's what you have. And so, of course, America, we are part of the problem. We're a big part of the problem. Now, that's not to say that India and China and some of these developing countries who are relying on a lot of coal power to enter, supply their cities with energy, aren't also a problem. But unlike us, they're actually in the Paris Climate Accords. They are actually doing something, as opposed to the United States, which is doing nothing. We're doing absolutely nothing. Now, these are our leaders. Now, look, there are other leaders in other places that refuse to do anything necessary to combat climate change, or at least to do what's necessary. Now, Guterres on that said, the time has come for our leaders to to show that they care about the people whose fate they hold in their hands. And says, we need to rapidly shift away from our dependence on fossil fuels. I think he's absolutely right about that. I've said before, we need a Marshall Plan to transfer us over to a 100% green renewable energy economy. That's what we need to do. Not only will we actually be doing something good for the environment, but that transition is going to create jobs. So there's going to be a ton of jobs being created if you put if you start using more alternative energy. Now, a start to that, of course, is the Paris Climate Accord, which actually limits carbon. Now, Donald Trump pulled America out of it. And I remember criticizing that accord for not being binding and also not going far enough. Guess who agrees? Guterres. He said these targets were really the bare minimum to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. But scientists tell us that we are far off track. So we had this climate accord, non-binding agreement, that we would all reduce it to try to keep our, temperatures within 2 degrees Celsius. We have not been doing it. Now, America pulling out, that was big enough, but the rest of the countries as well hold some responsibility. Now, according to a UN study, the commitments made so far by the parties to the Paris Agreement represent just a third of what is needed. So you have to understand that we cannot do barely the minimum to stave off catastrophic climate change. Why? Well, I think we all know the reason why. It's because fossil fuel companies pay off politicians to prevent change. Look, here's the thing. These oil companies, these fossil fuel companies, they're big corporations. And right now, our government is basically an oligarchy. So these companies hate competition. from solar energy, and of course, wind power and alternative energies in general. And so, of course, you have an administration that gets funded by these companies, who then, of course, will go and block these other forms of energy. The tariffs on solar panels is a great example, shipped over from China. China is actually now a leading manufacturer in solar panels. We could have done that here in the United States, but of course, our politicians instead doubled down on coal. Now, coal is not only dirty, but it's also more expensive than wind. Solar is actually getting more efficient. Battery technology is getting better. Wind, as I said before, cheaper. And scientists are even looking into other forms of energy that provide no waste products and efficient energy production. Despite that, here you have a situation where the fossil fuel industry and its lobbyists control our politicians with money. And of course, that is literally destroying our chances at survival. A company's profit, a CEO and shareholder profit, is holding our world hostage. We need a green revolution, and we need it now. But of course, whenever you say something like that we need to shift over, well, look, I'd love to, but it's too expensive. There are too many costs. And don't get me wrong, it is a serious undertaking, and it will cost money. But to say that our current situation comes with less cost would be absolutely wrong. In fact, Guterres addressed that by saying over the past decade, extreme weather and health impact of burning fossil fuels have cost the American economy at least $240 billion a year. The cost will explode by 50% in the coming decade alone. By 2030, the loss of productivity caused by a hotter world would cost the global economy a total of $2 trillion. So consider this. That is the costs of not doing anything. They're going to be far greater than if we actually do something. That's the reality. He said, finally, what we still lack, even after the Paris Agreement, is leadership and the ambition to do what is needed. And that's the problem here. There is no political will. No political will. We refuse to do what we're supposed to do, what we need to do. We are stuck with fossil fuels, not because there aren't alternatives, not because there's things that don't work. We have plenty of other options, but what we continue to do is we continue to do the status quo. Coal, oil, natural gas, and fracking. We cannot afford to do that anymore. People do not understand the danger that we are putting ourselves in, what we are doing to the planet. And what we do to the planet, we do to ourselves. And if you trash the planet, well, we're trashing ourselves too. And we have to make a change. We need that green energy revolution. We need that Marshall Plan for the environment, and we need it now. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.